going to start with paragraph structure. Top 5 or top 4 plus 1 basic components of the paragraph. Okay, I'm going to break this down. Thesis statement, evidence, analysis of the evidence and conclusion, a restriction on the thesis or an explanation for it. This is basically the most important thing you need to have in your paragraph. This is what your paragraph is about, and not only what your paragraph is about, but what you're going to say in that paragraph. What is it that you're going to argue? What am I going to be convinced of by the end of the paragraph? You are pretending to be a lawyer. You're stating, my client is innocent, and now you're going to prove it. But first you have to say, my client is innocent. This is what is true about the story. This is the interesting interpretation of the story. This is the argument that you must make. It's what you're going to convince us of in the paragraph. This has to be the first line, to announce to the readers, this is why it's worthwhile reading the paragraph, and this is the idea that you have to pay attention to throughout the paragraph. Stating it outright really helps understand your paragraph, and that's our ultimate goal here, to write clear paragraphs. The next sentence or two, or it can be the part of the first sentence, is more optional. Sometimes we make a very big argument, and then we have to break it down and restrict it. So even if you say, my client is innocent, you might say, my client is innocent, but only through these 2 crimes. Or my argument is that the wallpaper represents something, but only in the context of the ending of the story. I'll give you an example of this later. Or sometimes you have to explain your thesis more. So you might need to define a term or give some kind of context. What else people need to know to even start to understand your argument? Okay, and this depends on who you're stating to. A lot of people have the tendency to give this extra explanation before the thesis, right? Explain what the metaphor is before we can say that the yellow wallpaper is a metaphor. Sort of get it out of the way. Finish your explanation and only then make an argument. Okay, I understand why this makes sense to some of you, but the main thing for easy structure for your readers to understand is to know what you are arguing first, and then you can give the extra context, the extra explanations for what that thesis is. Now here's an example of a thesis. This thesis is a little too general. The wallpaper represents control over women. Okay, control over women, that's such a big topic. We need to restrict it maybe in order to say something specific about the story. What kind of control over women? It's better to rewrite it in a way that's more specific. In the yellow wallpaper, the wallpaper represents how society and especially men restrict women's freedom. Okay, so yes, society restricts women's freedom, not only controls them, but restricts their freedom. You could even add of movement, and especially men. Add some restrictions to your argument. It's not just society, especially women. Yes, especially men. Society in general, but also more specific. So you can even add the restriction to the same in the story, and this would be, the next sentence would be additional explanation and additional restrictions. In the story, much of this restriction of freedom is expressed in lack of freedom of movement, right? Not just any kind of freedom, not freedom of thought, not freedom of the press, freedom of movement, not being able to go out of the house. The main character is not allowed to move out of the room she hates or leave the house earlier than the planned date, right? I'm already starting to restrict it by giving the context of the story, right? This information is not about the wallpaper, but it is about giving context and explanation for the story. Sort of, this is something you should know about the story before I can continue addressing the wallpaper. A lot of you would want to say, in the yellow wallpaper, she's not allowed to leave the house, and only then give the thesis about the wallpaper itself. No, you want to say what the argument is.